I am here with Danielle Strickland, and she is so many things. I've rarely interviewed someone who is so many things. She's a spiritual leader, justice advocate, communicator, peacemaker, church planter, global anti-trafficker. She's written numerous books, last one being Better Together, started a number of organizations, Brave Global, Amplify Peace, Women's Speakers Collective, and Infinitum, which is a spiritual practice to help us all to get closer to Jesus. And I'm just so thrilled, Danielle, that you've spared time. Oh, by the way, and also is on the board of Alpha in Canada, for which we are extremely grateful. Danielle, your story is amazing, and I love the story about your parents. Both of your parents. Just say a little bit about that, because it's so amazing.
Yeah, this kind of incredible intervention by God through people that are willing to get involved, right? So just two Salvation Army officers in different communities looking for kids who are excluded and lost. Both my parents were orphaned as children and in really, sort of less than opportune homes.
Is that right? Your father was illegally sold?
Yeah, he was. He found a receipt for his purchase years after his, I don't know, what do you call that? Foster mom, I suppose, who obviously struggled with a lot of mental health issues. And yeah, for $50, he was bought. Yeah. And so the Salvation Army found him, like just people of God who were looking for the marginalized, the excluded, who were going out of their way to get in the way, is usually how I like to say that, to say to folks that don't normally get invited, hey, we want you to come. And both of them found home, each other, and a brand new life together. And so that's kind of where I come from.
I think that your parents sound so amazing. And I love the fact that they always supported the underdog. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was one of my favorite, people often will ask me, how did you get into kind of justice work or working with folks who are marginalized? And I just I don't think I ever realized it was an option. I thought that's just what we did. And so hockey night in Canada, beloved night in Canada, where everybody roots for their team. And of course, when I would come down and see my dad watching the game, I'd say, who are we cheering for tonight? And he would always tell me the team that was the underdog, because we were always on the side of the underdog and remain that way.
I absolutely love that story. Now, Daniel, I think I found out something about you that I didn't know before. It says here, in prison at the age of 17. Now, were you visiting the prison or were you in prison? What's that about?
Yeah, so this is this tricky, oppressive cycles, right, that happen. But I experienced a fair bit of sexual abuse as a child and some painful situations. And so began to kind of believe what I would call the lie of the enemy, which is that rebellion was freedom. I was brought up in a religious system that's pretty exact, and my dad was pretty authoritative. So I didn't go with either of those two things. And so I just took off, believed that rebellion was freedom, and went for it wholeheartedly, as I do most things. And then found that instead of leading me to freedom, it actually led me into smaller and smaller and smaller life and places, until finally I was in a holding cell in downtown Toronto, actually, underneath the basement of City Hall here. And spent about 3 months at a prison, remanded there.
And what did you learn from that experience?
Well, that's when I encountered Jesus. So again, this is history repeating itself. It's what I would call the unrelenting grace and love of God, like a God who refuses to give up. Yeah. And I'm underneath that prison cell. I've been estranged from my family. I've stolen a bunch of things from them and was unsafe to be around, and had been in and out of various prison police things over and over again. And I had pretty much given up. I was dead inside. I was addicted to drugs, so I wasn't really even feeling anything at all. So this Salvation Army officer, again, went out of her way to get in the way. She worked at the headquarters just down the street, and she came to visit me. She knew me from my parents' church work. And she came in to see me. No one else could get in there. You know, it's like the power of the super suit, I call it, the Salvation Army uniform. And so she came in to visit me at the prison. I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, brother, you know, here comes the Salvation Army. And she came into the cell, and I was bracing myself for some sort of lecture or, you know, like, what are you doing with your life? And she just handed me a lawyer's card. And then she just wrapped her arms around me and she whispered in my ear, I love you.
Oh.
And then she left. Now I didn't receive, I even shouted out after her, you know, you didn't even bring me a smoke. You know, I was completely ungrateful, couldn't care less, totally together. And the door shut behind me. I was all by myself in this holding cell. And then I had this full on open vision of Jesus. Just Jesus showed up in my jail cell and did the exact same thing, wrapped his arms around me, whispered in my ear, I love you. And that's when I say that a light came on, like quite literally on the inside of me. Like I awakened almost from a dream. I felt like I had been dreaming. And I said to I can't tell you exactly what I said, but I said to myself, like, oh, wow, like I'm in jail. This probably isn't good. And then started to begin a process of healing. And my mother says I never changed speeds. I just changed direction. And just kind of, a life of trying to get out of addiction and the grip of oppression in my own life, and then trying to get involved in whatever God invited me to participate in.
I mean, you've been such an advocate for justice issues all the way through. And I guess, I mean, the Salvation Army, I mean, I love the Salvation Army. It's an amazing organization. What did you learn from the Salvation Army?
Yeah, you know, it's really fascinating, but so many things. I mean, I learned that it's never too late. It's never too hard for God. You know, I mean, you just don't have to sift long through Salvation Army participants or people who belong to the Salvation Army to find just these like incredible miracle after miracle after miracle stories of God changing people's lives. I learned, you know, the idea of pouring it all out on a hard bet. You know, the Salvation Army are great bettors for people who don't gamble. They gamble with their resources a lot. So they place a lot of resources on people who are a gamble. And I learned that that's a kingdom principle. You know, I learned that God wants people to pour out resources on the gamble, you know, on the I don't know if this is going to work out, but it's worth everything I've got to see. I love that. I love, you know, some of the early stories of the Salvation Army that captured my imagination, that I just was kind of running after to catch up, you know, to some of those crazy early stories, like the Salvation Army invaded a Japanese brothel system and shut it down in 1902 with big bass drums and all nights of prayer, you know, just crazy stories that I just was like, yeah, let's do that again. You know, William Booth used to tell people that if you wanted to demonstrate the power of God, you would go to the darkest place and shine a light there. And I love that as a strategy. I think it's still something that I try to do.
Yeah, and you really have to, I mean, taking on sexual abuse, you know, in a massive way through your organizations and through your life. But I'd say a little bit about how that also, because that was, I love that story about how that all started for you.
And so I made unlikely friends with this madame of a brothel in Edmonton, Canada. And she was really jaded, like hardest woman I've ever met, actually. And I was asking her one day, you know, why do you do this with your life? Because you are a really capable, strong, amazing business person, like all the things. Why are you doing this? And she took me in the back room and she just shared with me, like, when I was 11 years old, I had been raped by my dad for the last time. And I ran away from home and I walked up this very street that this brothel's on, and a truck pulled over and a man picked me up and said, I'll give you a place to stay tonight if you have sex with me. And she said, I turned my first trick. I cried the whole night. I cried the whole next night. I cried the whole next night. And she said, when I got done crying, I did the best I could with what I'd been given. And here I am now. You know, she owns 3 brothels. And then she looked at me and her eyes filled with tears. So I knew like something was going on. She just looked at me and said, where were you when I was 11? And Nicky, what happened to me in the moment, I mean, it's bad enough that that's her story, but what happened to me in that moment that was so profound is that it was like I Rolodexed through all the stories, like hundreds of stories that I had heard that were exactly the same. Like, where were you when I was 11? And I realized even in that moment that I would trade everything I could to go back in time and be there when she was 11. Like what I wanted to do more than anything else was just like pause this moment, Doctor Who it back to
Yeah.
and stop the trajectory of the violence and the sexual abuse that was going to be her normal and then be perpetuated, And so I just really felt like that was a calling that God was saying, you can't be there for her when she's 11, but you now have heard this message loud and clear. You want to stop human trafficking. You want to stop the trajectory of oppression and violence. Stop it early. And I launched with a friend of mine, Noemi Chavez in Long Beach, a prevention strategy, which I'm really believing that churches will use and run and just like use it as a way to get there first and stop human trafficking. I think it's time.
But that's brave. That's the
Brave Global.
Brave Global. And just say a bit about that, because what you're teaching young women is self-defense, basically, isn't it?
Well, we're doing a few things. One is we think the church is the hope of the world. So we're trying to mobilize the church to partner with the community to end trafficking. So there's kind of 3 pillars of Brave. The first one is to say, we see you and you matter. So the first thing a church would do if they were going to participate in Brave Global is do like a quick research on where the vulnerable girls are in their district. And this is what's been so exciting is a lot of churches will go, I had no idea. Like there are 6 group homes in our region. We had no idea. And that's part of that perpetuating oppression is to not see it.
Yeah.
So to look for where the vulnerable girls are and then to say to them, you matter. Like we're going to actually put you at the front of things, not at the back of things. And then it's to say, we believe in you and you can do it. It's an empowering message, which is ultimately the message of the gospel. That's what makes it so good news, right? Is it's about empowerment. It's about empowering people to be who God wants them to be. But basically, it's to say, we see something in you that you might not have seen yourself, which is value. And then it's you're not alone. We can do this together. And that's where we ask churches to be these places of inclusion and belonging. And that what everybody ultimately needs is a family, a place to belong. Of course, and you see the threads in my own story coming through here of my excluded parents being included in a tribal family, that now we're in this thing together, and that was so instrumental in my life. But everybody needs this. And this is Isaiah, of course, coming true, isn't it? That God puts the lonely in families. That's what the gospel does.
So, I mean, sexual abuse is one of the things that, of course, it affects men as well as women, but predominantly, if you look at the statistics, it's women who've been subject to sexual abuse, but also women have been just disempowered. I haven't been given the roles. And another area where you, one of your organizations that you started is Women Speakers Collective. And just say a little bit about this, because obviously you're a phenomenal communicator and speaker, but you have kind of enabled so many women through this organization to develop speaking skills and to equalize the platform.
Yeah, ideally, and let's keep the dream alive, Nicky, and believe that we're working towards this. But whenever there's a deficit, of course, you're not working from an equal level, right? You're working from a deficit, both internally and externally. So I think there's internal systems that women have been taught and groomed, and culture has told women, especially Christian culture, that they are not able to use their voice or not welcome to use their voices in public forums, especially teaching men. So you have like a theology and a practice that has actually been detrimental for women discovering and using their gifts, especially when it comes to communicating outside of just women's things. So this is a really interesting, one of the things I do when I gather women at a boot camp, which is like a training program that I run, is we just have this solidarity exercise. And what we'll do is just have women stand if they have felt these things. And we run through this list of things. Like, have you ever been told you shouldn't speak? And like 80% of the room stands up. And this is 2020. This is 2020. And these are like strong women who are already at a training camp to use, like they're already speaking. And they'll stand up, and then I'll say, we'll ask the next question, have you ever been theologically challenged for speaking in church, and like half the room stands up. And then you start to realize when other people would talk to me I would say like, where are the women? Why aren't they communicating here? Why aren't there more women here? Like, this doesn't reflect the church very well. It doesn't reflect leadership very well. And leaders will say to me, like, we don't know where they are. We can't find them. And then also when we ask them, they won't do it.
Yeah.
So those were sort of some of the responses.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, that's fascinating. When I did my research for my book, Better Together, I found this research that says that the most confident a woman will be in her life is at age 9.
Huh.
And that
Huh.
after age 9, so this is fascinating, right? Because after, as soon as a woman hit like age 9, then we're talking puberty, which does a number on a woman's self-esteem body-wise. And then you hit high school, which does a number on a woman's self-esteem in terms of social. And then you just hit like mainstream culture, which is like highly sexualizing of women, like regular abuse, like 1 in 3 women sexually harassed in her lifetime. So you are thinking about a woman just getting to the place where she's willing to use her voice. You think of the things she has to get through and get to get just to that place. And I think for me, it's always just such a sobering exercise to do together, because that's the other thing that how oppression works is it singles people out. So they're by themselves. So they feel like they're the only one. So to have a collection, to have people say, no, 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 we're all in this together. We've all felt this. We've all heard this. We've all had pushback. And yet we're willing to listen to God and ask him to fill us with the good news that we are, capable, and we're given the gift, and that it's our job to use this gift for his glory.
How are we to change the way, not just in the church, but generally in society, but I guess specifically in the church as well? How are we to redress this balance?
I use these 3 little things that seem simple, but they actually always challenge me and can be so helpful. The first thing is to listen to voices you don't normally hear. This is challenge number 1, which in this day and age is even harder, even though we have all the information, because we have all these algorithms that just keep us in echo chambers, right? So we're stuck in these places where all we hear is the same thing over and over again. So if you can listen to voices that you don't normally hear, that's going to help you move. It's going to help with your perspective. It's going to help with everything. When it comes to women, I'll often challenge leadership teams, have a look around. If everybody around your leadership table is the same as you, you're missing people, and you don't even know you're missing people. And this happens with women a lot. You'll get a lot of guys around a table and they're all for women and they all like women and they're all like, convinced women should lead, but when there's no women around the table. So then you think, okay, why aren't they there? You'll never know unless you go find them and ask them. And so HSBC has a great story about this, how they actually kept losing all their senior managers, and then they would have to retrain all these other. Finally, they just had a conversation to say, like, can we go find those people we lost and say, why did we lose you? And when they went to find them, they found out they were all females, and they lost them because of work hours and the rigidity. There was no flexibility in the workplace. They were all becoming new parents, mothers, and they didn't want to sacrifice, that time and all this kind of stuff. And so then they actually went to like number 2, which is learn that there are new ways of doing things and new ways of approaching problems. So you listen to voices you don't normally hear. You learn ways of doing things differently. So HSBC started to realize, bank hours aren't fixed. Like maybe a 9 to 5 bank job isn't actually good even for our customers. Like maybe there's other ways. And so they learn new ways of doing it. And then the third thing is to live, to implement those things you're learning. And then basically just keep repeating that process over and over again. Listen to voices that you're not normally hearing, learn something new, and then implement those changes. And then HSBC, funny enough, they went to like number 1 company to work for. They realized that in harnessing the diversity, it was a means by which they actually harnessed their business for the world. It was lucrative. This is a good idea. Everybody in business, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, is like women, and harnessing the power of women. You want to end global poverty? Ask the UN what their number 1 millennial development goal that will do all of the things that they hope to do. It'll be the empowerment of women. So it's a very fascinating thing that the very thing the gospel is about is the very thing that actually would make us better businesses, better churches, better leaders if we led together.
One of the many things I love about you, Danielle, is that you're absolutely passionate about pushing women's rights, but there's no hint of any kind of dislike of men, or you've got 3 sons, and I think I heard what you say to them each night. Just say what you say to your boys.
Yeah.
like
So
Moses.
we go through this little routine ever since they could even just like start talking. And I'll say to Moses specifically, Moses, who made you? Moses just looks at me with this big smile and he says, God made me. And I'll say, yeah, honey, he sure did. And how did he make you? And he says, he made me good.
Yeah. But particularly you're speaking to your boys, you're speaking to men, and you're not
Yes.
saying to them, men are terrible. And it's like, because it's so hard to get that balance in the world. You either get people who sort of hate one or hate the other. It's like, but you love both. And that's Jesus.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the wisdom of God putting me in a family of men, right? For
Yeah.
sure. Because I have had to resist it because the temptation is so, especially when you're hearing story after story after story. So, like in my Better Together book, I talk about one particular day and just driving home after listening to another story and watching these cars pull up to, pick up these exploited women. And just like with minivans and police officers and teacher, I mean, just like, and I remember driving home and thinking to myself, like, are there any good men left in this world? Just like wanting to just really weeping, even just going like, is this really it? This is all men can do. And then I got to my front door. And when I opened my front door, like one of my boys just came running and gave me a big bear hug and just said, Mom, I'm so glad you're home. And then I just realized, and of course I'm married to a really good man, so that helps me a lot. But I just realized in the moment, even as he hugged me, just some of that angst and fear melting away, because as a mother, I refuse to believe that my kids are destined to badness. I refuse to believe that my kids are destined to be abusers or harassers towards women. And so there's something, that motherly resolve, which of course is the same thing God, he refuses to believe that his children can't be fully redeemed. He refuses to believe that any problem is insurmountable, and that grace can't conquer it and help us and restore us to what we were originally intended to be. So I think that sure has helped. Absolutely.
Right. You've got huge courage because you've taken on these issues, and taking on these issues. And there are a lot of people out there who don't believe in equality, but they'll find reasons to criticize any kind of movement towards racial diversity. So they'll find reasons. And you must have had a lot of that opposition stuff.
Yeah. And I think what it is that we have really been dominated by a culture of fear. And I learned early on, which I'm so grateful for, that fear is a currency of oppression. I actually learned this by studying the book of Exodus, because I always knew that fear is what kept people oppressed.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize till I read Exodus chapter 1 is that because Pharaoh was afraid of the Jews, he oppressed them.
Yeah.
So then I realized that actually, and this has also made a lot of sense, that Jesus never stopped saying, do not be afraid.
Yes.
And every time God encounters humanity, he says, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be. It's like literally, if you could just describe the Bible, it would be like, don't be afraid. And so I realized that fear, if you're making decisions based on fear, or you're even not doing things out of fear. So if you're being motivated by fear, you will either be oppressed or you'll be an oppressor.
Yeah.
So to stop the oppression, both inside and out, requires us to stop being afraid. And I think that lesson, because it's not like I learned it and now I'm good. It's like fear is like the culture. It's the water we're swimming in. This is a culture of fear. There's no question about it. Just watch the news.
Yeah.
Fear sells, fear motivates, fear. So if we can be a people that aren't afraid, I think this is maybe one of the most countercultural things we can do with our lives right now as the church, is to just not be afraid and to not be driven by fear or motivated by fear in any of the decisions that we do.
And how do you overcome fear in your own life?
Yeah, there's only one way to overcome fear that I have discovered in my own life, and it's the presence of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's it, the presence of God. Like the presence of love, that's what the scripture says, casts out fear. And not like as some sort of like religious, I can't just say it out. I have to identify the fear. I have to invite Jesus into the fear. And then I have to watch with him as that fear begins to dissipate. So it's a confrontation of fear, not a denial of fear, because that's the temptation, right? As Christians, is we just deny the fear as though if we say it loud enough, we won't be. But no, it's to identify, this is where I'm afraid. And then it's to invite Jesus into that spot to do it with you. And the presence of love, the presence of grace, the presence of God is what allows fear to lose its grip on my mind and my life and my church and, the way that we do things.
And I think a lot of people right now with COVID-19 and isolation and are feeling like the first 6 months they're running on adrenaline and like it was, yeah, this is going to be okay. And, oh, mate, now it's going to be another. Now, oh, I'm exhausted. How do you get patterns in your life to cope with that kind of exhaustion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I am experimenting even as we speak with this very thing. I think everyone's feeling that, what we call surge depletion, right? Where we've just depleted all the resources of our emotional capacity. So here we are at empty. Every day I pray this daily prayer and I posture my life and I ask Jesus to be the center today. That's it. And all my day is not measured by like how this last 25 years have gone or anything like that. Today is Jesus alive and leading and at the center of my life today. That's it. That's all I'm concerned with. And I feel like that has been one of the most liberating and invigorating ways. It's not always fancy. It doesn't always feel good, but it's literally like just a little posture shift every day where I use my body. So I just hold up my hands and I say like, this life's too hard for me. This day is too hard for me. Like, I don't have what it takes. And so I'm just like, over to you, God. This belongs to you.
I'm joining you.
I do this with my kids too when they go into school. And then I hold my hands out open. And this was a game changer for me, Nicky, that generosity, I used to think was just giving more. And then I realized that generosity is reciprocal.
Yeah.
That it's freely receiving as good as I freely give. That's it. And I'm a conduit.
I'm receiving right now.
Yeah. So then I just say today, I just open my hands and I say, God, you know what I need today? I need patience. I need kindness. I need forgiveness. I need grace. I run out of patience by 8 a.m. because I got 3 boys. I need patience today. Like I need kindness and not just, I need it. Like I need it. I need to be kind to myself. I need to be generous to myself. And I ask for what I need. Yeah. And you know what's fascinating? All the things that I need, I have inexhaustible, like God has all of it and more, Like he's like, you need mercy. I top that up every single day, right? So then I just keep my hands open and I say, everything that I've so freely received from you, I am going to freely give today. That's it. It's not that. And then my last posture, just the third one, is a posture of mission. And I open my hands and I imagine myself like the father in the prodigal story of the father. And I just say, my life is open to the needs of the world. Like I refuse to stay closed. Yeah. And my life is postured to others, both those nearest to me, but also those farthest away. And you're welcome here. Like this life is a welcome zone for you. And that's my daily prayer and practice. And I do this with some friends. So we get together. So I'm not doing this by myself. And it's been a game changer in both sustainable practices, but also just the way that I posture my day. It's so liberating.
I can't thank you enough, Danielle, because you have been such an inspiration to us, to our church, and to the world with all these books. And what an entrepreneur! What an example you are! And thank you so much for who you are and your family. And much love to you all. God bless.
Thank you, Nicky.